That key cannot belong to you. Step away from the vault.
Then call the board and tell them Evelyn Carter is here.
The security guard stepped in front of the teller line before Evelyn Carter reached the brass stanchion. "Mom, you can't solicit inside the bank." Evelyn stopped beneath the chandelier of Harbor and Pine's flagship branch, rainwater darkening the shoulders of her threadbare wool coat. At 74, she carried herself with the straight-backed patience of a woman who had spent decades entering rooms where people decided what she deserved before she spoke. Gray braids were tucked beneath a faded scarf, and the canvas grocery bag in her hand had been mended twice along the seam. "I'm not soliciting," she said. "I'm here to access my safe deposit box." The guard looked past her toward the customers in tailored coats, as though one of them might explain how she had wandered in. "Safe deposit services are for account holders. I am an account holder." Evelyn reached into the bag and removed a worn leather envelope. She placed her state identification and a small brass key on the polished counter beside the line. The key bore the stamped number 317. "I called yesterday. I was told the box could be opened before noon." A young teller named Paige glanced over from her station. Her eyes settled first on Evelyn's coat, then on the grocery bag, and only afterward on the identification. "That branch number doesn't look right," she said without picking it up. "It is not a branch number. It is the box number." Paige gave the guard a quick smile, the kind exchanged between people who believed they were managing the same inconvenience. We've had people come in with old keys they found at estate sales. Sometimes they think the key means they own whatever is inside. Evelyn looked at her. "Do you tell every customer that before checking their name?" The smile left Paige's face. She turned to her terminal and tapped the keyboard with 2 fingers. A middle-aged man waiting behind Evelyn shifted his umbrella to his other hand. Near the mortgage desks, a black courier paused while arranging envelopes in a delivery bin. He had heard the exchange, though he lowered his eyes when the guard noticed him watching. "What is the account number?" Paige asked. "My identification should bring up the relationship." "We need an account number. You did not ask the gentleman before me for one. He had his debit card." Evelyn slid a dark green bank card from the leather envelope. It was an older design issued before Harbor and Pine changed its crest. Paige turned it over, then held it by the edges as if it might leave residue on her fingers. "This card expired 8 years ago. The checking card expired. The trust relationship did not." Paige leaned toward the guard. She may be confused. Evelyn heard the sentence clearly. So did the man with the umbrella. His mouth tightened, but he said nothing. The courier looked up again, this time toward the security camera mounted above the teller clock. "I am standing 3 feet from you," Evelyn said. "You can address me directly." A supervisor emerged from behind the glass offices. His nameplate read Martin Vale, Client Rivas manager. He took in the wet coat, the repaired bag, and the growing line. "What seems to be the issue?" Paige lowered her voice, but not enough. "She has an obsolete card and a loose box key. She says she has a trust account, but she cannot provide the number." "I said the identification would locate it," Evelyn replied. "Your bank's procedure allows verification by legal name, date of birth, and signature card when an account number is unavailable." Martin's attention sharpened for half a second. Then he looked at the customers waiting behind her. "That procedure is not available at the teller counter. Then take me to the vault desk." "The vault desk is appointment only. I have an appointment." "Do you have written confirmation?" "The employee I spoke with said my name was entered." Martin extended his hand toward the key. "We will need to retain that while we determine whether it belongs to bank property." Evelyn covered the key with 2 fingers. The brass was warm from her palm. "May inspect it in my presence. Do not confiscate it." His expression hardened. "Refusing to cooperate makes it difficult for us to help you." Behind her, the man with the umbrella finally spoke. "She has been cooperating." Martin did not turn around. "Sir, we are handling a security concern." The words changed the shape of the room. The guard moved closer, no longer blocking the line but positioning himself between Evelyn and the exit to the vault corridor. Paige began typing again, this time into a screen Evelyn could not see. The courier quietly removed his phone from his pocket, not to film, but to note the time printed on the lobby clock. Evelyn gathered her identification and expired card, leaving the key beneath her fingertips. "Before you enter anything into my customer record, tell me exactly what you are entering." Paige stopped typing. Martin's voice became formal. They're documenting disruptive behavior and suspected misuse of bank credentials. Evelyn looked from him to the camera above the clock. Then she slid the brass key back into its envelope. "Document my request as well," she said. "I asked for identity verification, access to Box 317, and preservation of today's lobby footage." Martin nodded toward the guard. "Escort her to the waiting area until we decide whether law enforcement needs to be contacted." The guard reached for Evelyn's elbow. She stepped aside before he touched her, but the incident report had already been opened under her name. The guard's hand hovered in the air after Evelyn stepped away. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 30, with a wedding band and a crease between his eyebrows that had deepened each time. Martin called the situation a security concern. "Mom," he said, lowering his voice, "please take a seat while they sort this out." Evelyn chose the chair nearest the vault corridor, not the one Martin indicated beside the entrance. Its leather cushion released a tired sigh beneath her. From there she could see Page's terminal reflected in the glass wall behind the teller stations. The words were unreadable, but the red banner across the screen was familiar. Harbor and Pine used that color when a client profile had been placed under restriction. Evelyn had approved the design 18 years earlier because a red warning could not be mistaken for an ordinary service note. Martin followed her gaze and shifted his body between her and the reflection. "You need to remain seated. I am seated, and you need to stop monitoring employees. I am watching my information being handled." He returned to Page, where they spoke in voices meant to appear discreet rather than be discreet. Page had found 3 Evelyn Carters in the system. One had closed an account in 2019. Another lived in Maryland. The third profile required what Page called executive authorization, though she skipped past the notation before reading it aloud. Martin bent toward the monitor. "That cannot be her." Page whispered something Evelyn missed. "Use the ordinary profile," he said. "Flag the identification and attach the incident." The courier by the delivery bin heard him. His name was Andre Lewis, according to the badge clipped to his jacket, and he had spent 6 months carrying inter-office packets between Harbor and Pine branches. He set down the last envelope and approached the counter. "Excuse me. Before you attach anything, I heard her ask you not to alter her customer record until you explain the entry." Martin turned. "This is not your concern. I deliver compliance packets here. I know those entries are time-stamped. You also know discussing customer matters is prohibited." Andre swallowed. The warning struck where Martin intended it to. Contract couriers could lose routes over a single complaint, and Andre's hand tightened around the scanner hanging from his wrist. Still, he looked toward Evelyn. "I only said what I heard." The man with the umbrella had moved out of line. "So did I," he said. She showed identification, a bank card, and a key. No one checked the appointment log. Martin glanced around the lobby, measuring the attention gathering near the teller line. "Page, close the profile. We will handle this privately." Page clicked twice. Evelyn saw the red banner disappear. "Is the entry saved?" Evelyn asked. Page looked at Martin before answering. "The system autosaves notes. What did you enter? We do not disclose internal security documentation." Evelyn rose. Her knees protested beneath the damp hem of her skirt, but she kept one hand on the chair until the stiffness passed. "Then provide the name of your privacy officer and the procedure for disputing inaccurate information." Martin's patience thinned. "You are not in a position to make demands." "No," Evelyn said. "I am in a position to make a written request. Your position determines whether you honor it." For the first time, the guard looked directly at Martin instead of Evelyn. Martin noticed. "Call building security," he told Page. "Not the police yet. We will give her one final opportunity to leave voluntarily." Evelyn felt the old impulse to end the humiliation quickly. She could have spoken one name, requested one internal extension, and watched half the lobby change its posture. That was how her late husband had handled conflict. Reveal the strongest card before anyone could damage the table. But Evelyn had come to Box 317 because of a promise she had made after his funeral, and using his methods now would defeat the reason for opening it. "Please check yesterday's vault appointments," she said again. Page opened a scheduling window. "There is no Evelyn Carter. Check appointments entered by Miriam Shaw." Page typed the name, then paused. "Miriam is the Regional Fiduciary Officer. I know her title." Martin reached across and closed the window before Page could continue. "This has gone far enough. Andre lifted his scanner. Card's delivery times, he said, almost apologetically. I arrived at 10:14. The conversation started less than a minute later. Martin's face tightened. Leave the premises, Mr. Lewis. Your employer will hear about this. Andre unclipped his badge, stared at it, then placed it on the counter instead of obeying. Then tell them I stayed because you were creating a record you knew might be wrong. Behind the glass offices, a side door opened. A silver-haired woman in a navy suit entered the lobby carrying a vault ledger. She saw Evelyn beside the chair, the guard near her shoulder, and Martin blocking Page's monitor. Mrs. Miriam Shaw said, "Why haven't they taken you downstairs?" Martin turned so quickly that his sleeve struck the brass key tray. Miriam's gaze moved to the red incident icon still blinking in the corner of Page's screen. "And why," she asked, "is the chair of the Carter Family Trust flagged as a credential threat?" Miriam set the vault ledger on Page's counter without taking her eyes off Martin. The book landed with a dense cloth-bound thud, its corners softened by decades of use. Answer the question. Martin recovered enough to straighten his cuffs. Mrs. Carter presented expired credentials and became uncooperative when we attempted to verify them. We followed the branch's security protocol. You attempted to take my key, Evelyn said. Then you entered suspected credential misuse into a profile you had not verified. Miriam looked at Page. Opened the audit trail. Page's fingers remained above the keyboard. Mr. Vale told me to use the ordinary profile. I heard what he told you. Open it. The red incident icon expanded into a pane showing each action in order. Page had searched Evelyn's name at 10:16, opened the restricted trust profile at 10:18, and backed out 11 seconds later. At 10:19, she had selected a dormant retail profile belonging to a different Evelyn Carter and attached a note describing aggressive behavior, possible theft of bank property, and refusal to provide identification. The man with the umbrella gave a low, disbelieving breath. Andre did not speak. His scanner remained on the counter beside his discarded badge, its display still showing the time he had entered the building. Miriam read the note twice. Identification, Page's cheeks flushed. Yes, and the key? Box 317. Miriam opened the ledger to a ribboned page. Evelyn saw her own signature from 14 years earlier beside the box number, followed by the trust seal and a notation requiring dual verification for access. Miriam turned the book toward Martin. The key matches. The appointment was entered under fiduciary services because Mrs. Carter requested privacy. Martin barely glanced down. The problem was her presentation. She arrived carrying a grocery bag and could not state an account number. We have obligations to protect client assets. The explanation sounded almost reasonable until Evelyn looked at the man he had admitted before her. He had forgotten his account number, too. Page had found him by scanning his license, then offered him coffee while the system loaded. You had an obligation to verify mine, Evelyn said. Instead, you decided which customer profile looked believable. Martin's jaw worked before he answered. Nothing irreversible has happened. You can correct the note. Miriam pointed to the top of the pane. The incident triggered an automated hold. Page leaned closer to the screen. It froze the retail profile. Look again, Miriam said. A linked relationship warning had appeared beneath the note. Because the dormant account shared Evelyn's legal name, birth date, and taxpayer identification number, the system had propagated the credential alert across every associated entity pending fraud review. That included the Carter Family Trust, 3 charitable accounts, and the ownership vehicle holding a controlling interest in Harbor and Pine Bank shares. Evelyn felt the cost before anyone named it. The trust had scheduled a noon transfer to fund emergency repairs at a senior housing cooperative on the south side. A frozen relationship would stop the release, and the building's contractor had already delayed once. 42 residents were waiting for heat to be restored in the East Wing. Remove the hold, Martin said. I cannot, Page whispered. It has been routed to Central Fraud. Then call them. Miriam shook her head. A branch cannot reverse a credential alert after customer risk language has been submitted. Fraud must preserve the record and conduct an independent review. Martin turned on Evelyn. Hey, you understand this was a misunderstanding. If you confirm that no threat was intended, we can expedite the correction. Evelyn studied him. He was no longer questioning whether she belonged in the bank. He was asking her to help erase how he had decided she did not. I will confirm exactly what occurred, she said. nothing less and nothing shaped to protect you. The guard moved away from her shoulder. He removed a small incident notebook from his pocket and looked at the blank page as though it had become heavier. Mr. Vale told me she was soliciting before anyone checked her identification, he said. I did not see her threaten anyone. Martin stared at him. You are not qualified to interpret client interactions. I am qualified to say what you told me. Miriam picked up the internal phone and requested immediate preservation of the lobby footage, teller audit logs, appointment record, and access history for Evelyn's profiles. Then she asked Central Fraud to mark the alert as disputed rather than confirmed. It would not release the accounts, but it would prevent the allegation from hardening into an accepted fact while investigators reviewed it. Evelyn removed the brass key from its envelope and placed it beside the open ledger. Box 317 stays sealed until the record is preserved and the hold is reviewed. Miriam nodded. That may delay the trust transfer. I know. The words hurt more than Evelyn allowed her face to show. She had come to retrieve a letter that could settle a private promise to her husband. Now she was choosing to leave it underground while people across town waited for money only she could authorize. Andre lifted his scanner and photographed its timestamp beside the lobby clock. Then he sent the image to his personal email before Martin could order him out again. At 10:41, Miriam submitted the formal preservation request. At 10:42, Evelyn signed a written dispute beneath the sentence accusing her of credential misuse. The bank system assigned the case a permanent review number, carrying Martin's note, age is keystrokes, and Evelyn's objection beyond the control of anyone inside the branch. By noon, the rain had thinned to a gray mist over the south side. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat of Miriam's sedan, with the heater running against her damp skirt, watching contractors unload portable units beside the brick senior cooperative. The trust transfer had not cleared. Without it, the building manager could cover only 12 apartments before nightfall. You could authorize a personal bridge loan, Miriam said. Repay yourself when fraud releases the accounts. Evelyn kept her eyes on the workers carrying heaters through the side entrance. That would solve today and teach the bank nothing. It would also keep 30 people from sleeping in coats. I know what it would do. Miriam gripped the steering wheel. They had known each other for 22 years, long enough for politeness to become a tool rather than a habit. You are allowed to protect the residents and still fight the bank. Evelyn turned toward her, and when Central Fraud asks whether the hold caused measurable harm, what do we show them? That I quietly covered it? Martin already called the damage reversible. That is not why you are hesitating. The answer touched the private thing Evelyn had carried since the branch. Ethan. Box 317 held the final handwritten memorandum from her husband Samuel, drafted during the week he learned his heart would not recover. She had delayed opening it for 3 years because he had built Harbor and Pine through relentless control, and she feared the letter would ask her to keep ruling it in his image. This morning had been meant to end that fear. Instead, Martin's note had turned grief into an exhibit she could not reach. I should have called you from the lobby, Evelyn said. You should have been served without calling anyone. I knew what one extension would do. I chose not to use it. Miriam's expression softened, though her disagreement remained. You also chose not to warn me that you were testing the branch. I was not testing them. I wore what I had on after helping Mrs. Bell clear water from her kitchen. I came as I was, and once they failed, you stayed long enough for the failure to deepen. Evelyn looked back at the building. A woman in a purple housecoat stood behind a second-floor window, rubbing warmth into her arms. Miriam had named the part Evelyn did not want named. She had wanted the record clean, the bias undeniable. Somewhere between Martin's first refusal and the incident note, she had stopped thinking only like a customer and started thinking like a governor gathering facts. That choice had preserved the truth, but it had also increased the cost. Her phone rang. The display showed Harbor and Pine Central Fraud Review. Evelyn answered on speaker. A woman introduced herself as Lena Ortiz, senior investigator. Her tone was measured, neither deferential nor suspicious. Mrs. Carter, we have secured the lobby footage and the profile audit trail. The hold remains active while we determine whether the credential alert was entered in good faith. Good faith is not the only issue, Evelyn said. Check whether the branch followed identification procedure before submitting it. We will. Also compare how customers without account numbers were handled during the same hour. There was a pause, then the soft sound of keys. Each request goes beyond the individual incident. The individual incident was justified by a procedure. Either the procedure was applied consistently or it was not, Lena did not argue. I can request a limited service comparison, but I need authorization from risk oversight. Miriam leaned closer to the phone. You have it from the regional fiduciary office. I will send the written request, Lena continued. There is another matter. Mr. Vale submitted a supplemental statement at 11:23. He says Mrs. Carter withheld her ownership connection to provoke a confrontation and that staff were placed under unusual pressure. Evelyn felt a tired laugh rise, though no humor came with it. Did he claim I concealed my identity? He claimed you allowed employees to form a false impression. Employees formed an impression from my coat before they checked my identification. I understand your position, Lena said. The supplemental statement will be preserved with the original record. After the call, Miriam struck the steering wheel once with the heel of her hand. He is building retaliation into the file. He is building intent around my silence, Evelyn said. That means he knows the procedure alone will not protect him. A knock sounded against Evelyn's window. Andre stood outside in the mist, his courier jacket zipped to his chin. Miriam lowered the glass. My company suspended me from the route, he said. Mr. Vale reported that I interfered with client security. He held out a printed receipt, but the scanner server kept my arrival time, and I wrote down what he said before they disabled my access. Evelyn took the paper. Andre's hand shook from cold or anger, perhaps both. I am sorry this reached your job, she said. So am I. He glanced toward the cooperative windows. But I am not changing what I heard. Evelyn folded the receipt along its existing crease. Her instinct was to promise that she would protect him. She stopped herself before making a promise her title could not instantly fulfill. I can request preservation and an independent review, she said. I cannot guarantee the outcome. Andre nodded. That is more honest than what they told me. Across the street, the first portable heater came on behind a ground-floor window. 12 apartments would have warmth. 30 would not. Evelyn called the cooperative manager and authorized the emergency reserve to be divided among the most medically vulnerable residents, accepting that the choice would leave others waiting. Then, she asked Miriam to open a second case file, not about her ownership or the frozen trust, but about Martin's report against Andre. The second case file changed the shape of the investigation before Evelyn returned to Harbor and Pine. At 1:18, Ina Ortiz linked Andre's suspension notice to Martin's supplemental statement. At 1:26, she requested the courier company preserve the complaint that had triggered his removal. By 1:41, the complaint arrived with Martin's electronic signature and a claim that Andre had encouraged an unidentified woman to resist lawful security instructions. The word unidentified remained in the report even though Martin had opened Evelyn's profile before ordering Andre from the branch. Lena called Miriam first. I need both of you back here, she said. Risk Oversight approved the service comparison, and we found something that cannot be handled through the branch. Evelyn looked through the cooperative's glass doors. The lobby had become a warming room for residents from the East Wing. 12 portable units hummed along the baseboards, their cords taped down in crooked silver lines. Mrs. Bell sat beneath 2 blankets, complaining that the heat smelled like burned dust. The ordinary irritation steadied Evelyn more than sympathy would have. I am staying until the evening placement list is finished, she said. Miriam covered the phone. This may affect whether the trust hold is lifted. It already affected people here. They returned to the flagship branch shortly after 3. Martin was no longer in the lobby. Paige stood behind a closed teller station with a compliance representative beside her, while the guard sat inside a glass office writing his statement. Andre had been asked to attend by video from his employer's depot, where he was still suspended from duty. Lena met Evelyn in a small conference room overlooking the vault corridor. She wore no executive badge, only a charcoal cardigan and an access card turned backward on its clip. On the table lay a printed timeline, a lobby service log, and 6 still images taken from security footage. He reviewed every customer interaction between 9:30 and 11, Lena said. 4 customers could not provide an account number. 3 were offered alternate verification immediately. You were the only one referred to security before an identification search. Evelyn sat without touching the documents. What reason did staff give? Page said your expired card and the box key created suspicion. The others, one had no card at all. Another presented a damaged license. A third gave an address that did not match the account. Miriam opened the service log. Were any of them described as confused? No. Disruptive? No. Potentially in possession of stolen bank property? Lena looked toward the closed door before answering. No. The comparison did not prove every thought that had passed through Martin's mind. Evelyn knew that, and Lena said so. It did prove that the branch had used a harsher path for the only elderly black woman in the group, then documented her reaction as the reason for the path already chosen. Lena slid another page forward. There is more. When Page opened the restricted trust profile, the screen displayed a verification instruction. It did not require executive approval. Directed staff to contact fiduciary services and confirm a scheduled appointment. Miriam read the instruction aloud, do not deny access based solely on the absence of a current retail card. Evelyn heard Martin's earlier voice inside the sentence he had ignored. That cannot be her. Page saw this, Evelyn asked. Yes. She remained on the screen for 11 seconds. And Martin? The footage shows him leaning toward the monitor. We cannot prove what he read from the camera angle. Page says she told him the profile required fiduciary verification. He told her to use the ordinary profile instead. The door opened, and the compliance representative brought Page inside. Her makeup had worn away beneath her eyes. She sat across from Evelyn but addressed Lena. I thought Mr. Vale knew something I didn't, she said. He said the trust profile was probably a namesake error. Why did you write that Mrs. Carter refused identification? Lena asked. Page pressed her palms together. He dictated the first sentence. I added the part about the key. Did Mrs. Carter refuse identification? No. Did she threaten you? No. Did she attempt to enter the vault? Page shook her head. Evelyn had imagined this moment while sitting outside the cooperative. In that private version, she spoke with perfect calm and made Page understand the weight of every choice. Now, looking at the young woman's trembling hands, Evelyn felt anger tangled with something less convenient. Why did you laugh when I showed you the key? She asked. Page's eyes finally lifted. I don't know. That is not true. Page swallowed. I thought you had found it somewhere. I thought you were trying to sound like you belonged here. The answer was small and ugly because it required no conspiracy, just a judgment shared quickly enough to become procedure. Lena closed the folder. Central Fraud had sufficient basis to remove the credential alert and release the trust relationship under monitored status. Detailed profile note would remain preserved as disputed evidence, not as a customer risk finding. Martin was being removed from duty pending an independent investigation. Page would remain off the teller floor while her conduct and training record were reviewed. Evelyn did not thank them. What about Andre? The retaliation case is being referred to vendor oversight, Lena said. The employer has agreed to restore his route temporarily while the complaint is examined. Temporarily is not protection. No, Lena said, but it is what my authority can accomplish today. At 3:37, the hold lifted. Miriam opened her laptop, and Evelyn authorized the delayed transfer to the cooperative. The confirmation appeared with an expected settlement time of 17 minutes. Then Lena placed one final document on the table. It was not part of Evelyn's case. Over the previous 14 months, Martin's branch had generated 9 credential threat notes involving older customers whose accounts were later verified as valid. 7 had been attached to black clients. The room did not need another speech. Evelyn looked through the glass toward the vault corridor, where Box 317 remained sealed underground. Reserve all 9 files, she said. No one opens my box until we know whether this branch made a habit out of deciding who looked believable. By 4:15, Evelyn. Harbor and Pines legal department had placed a preservation hold on all 9 credential threat files. Lena projected the case summaries onto the conference room wall, while Miriam compared them with branch schedules and customer service notes. The pattern was uneven enough to resist an easy conclusion. 2 clients had arrived with altered checks. One had confused the branch with a different bank, and another had argued with security before anyone opened an account profile. The files could not be treated as identical simply because Martin's name appeared in each. Evelyn stood beside the window overlooking the teller floor. Page's station had been closed, but customers continued entering beneath the chandelier. shaking rain from umbrellas and asking questions in ordinary voices. Separate what happened before verification from what happened after, she said. If the staff had an objective reason to pause, record it. If they invented the reason after deciding the customer did not belong, record that too. Lena changed the comparison fields. That will take more than a document review. We need interviews, full footage where it still exists, and transaction histories. How much footage remains? 30 days under normal retention. 3 files are recent enough. The others may depend on archived incident clips. Miriam looked at Evelyn. The board can authorize an external review tomorrow. The board should authorize it, Evelyn said. I should not direct the findings. You hold the controlling vote. That is why I should not choose the answer. Miriam closed the ledger in front of her. And while you protect the process from your influence, Martin's counsel will argue that the chair arrived disguised, provoked an incident, and launched an investigation into employees who failed to recognize her. I did not arrive disguised. You know what they will call it? Evelyn turned from the window. Then let them call it that in writing. The sharpness in her voice made Miriam sit back. Evelyn regretted it at once, but not enough to soften the point. She had spent years correcting Samuel when he confused control with certainty. Now she could feel the same habit growing inside her, fed by the clean authority of being right. Lena's phone vibrated against the table. She read the message, then opened a secured video file from the branch archive. Veteran Oversight recovered the complaint call Martin made about Andre. The courier company records service disputes. Andre's face appeared in a smaller window from the depot break room. He had been restored to his route for the next morning, though his supervisor had warned him that the arrangement could change. Can I hear the call? He asked. Lena hesitated. It contains personnel allegations about you. They already cost me a shift. Evelyn looked at him through the screen. It should be reviewed by the investigator first. Andre's expression tightened. Everyone keeps deciding what I can handle. That is not what I meant. It is what happened. The rebuke landed because he was right. Evelyn had asked him to risk his employment by telling the truth, then reached for protection that looked too much like silence. Play it, she said. Martin's recorded voice filled the room. He told the courier supervisor that Andre had encouraged a trespasser to challenge lawful instructions and had attempted to create evidence for a fraudulent claim. When the supervisor asked whether the woman had been identified, Martin said, not reliably. The call had been placed at 10:34, 7 minutes after Miriam entered the lobby and addressed Evelyn by name and title. Lena replayed that portion. The timestamp glowed beneath the waveform. Andre leaned toward his camera. He knew who she was. He knew her name, Miriam said. And he knew fiduciary services recognized her. Lena opened Martin's supplemental statement. It claimed he had not understood Evelyn's identity or relationship to the bank until after Andre was removed from the premises. The complaint call did not prove why Martin had treated Evelyn as suspicious at the start, but it directly contradicted the timeline he later submitted to Central Fraud. Evelyn studied the waveform. The decisive point was not that Martin had failed to recognize a billionaire. It was that once correction became possible, he had chosen to preserve his version by damaging 2 other people's records. Add the call to both cases, she said. Do not merge them. Andre's complaint belongs to him. Lena nodded. Oversight can now challenge the basis of his suspension. Martin's statement will also be tested against the lobby footage tomorrow morning. Miriam asked what Evelyn wanted from the review beyond restoring accounts and correcting records. Evelyn looked down at the brass key resting beside the vault ledger. A written rule requiring alternate verification before security escalation. Independent review of every credential threat note from this branch. Protection for employees and contractors who preserve a disputed record. And no customer risk label based on appearance, tone, or a manager's belief that someone does not fit the profile. Lena wrote each demand without promising it would be granted. At 5:12, the cooperative manager called to confirm that the repair transfer had settled. The East Wing would have full heat before midnight. Evelyn listened to the relief in his voice, then ended the call without mentioning what the delay had cost. On Lena's screen, the recovered complaint recording was marked authenticated. The next morning, Martin would be required to explain the 7 minutes his statement had erased. At 9 the next morning, Martin Vale entered Harbor and Pine's board review room. with an employment attorney and a folder thick enough to suggest preparation rather than clarity. Evelyn sat halfway down the table beside Miriam, not at the chair's place. Ortiz had arranged the evidence in separate packets. Evelyn's customer dispute, Andre's vendor retaliation complaint, Page's statement, the guard's notebook, and the 9 older credential cases still under preliminary review. Martin's attorney began by objecting to Evelyn's presence. Mrs. Carter is the complainant, the controlling shareholder, and the board chair. Any decision made in this room will be vulnerable to the appearance of predetermined judgment. I agree, Evelyn said. The attorney paused. Evelyn slid a signed page toward the independent directors. I have recused myself from disciplinary votes and from selecting the external reviewer. I am here to give evidence and answer questions. My ownership does not make my account less admissible, and it does not make Mr. Lewis's complaint mine. One of the directors, a retired regulator named Helen Brooks, accepted the document. The recusal is entered. Mr. Vale will answer the investigator's questions. Lena did not begin with Evelyn's coat or the box key. She placed the branch procedure on the screen and asked Martin to describe the required steps when a client lacked a current bank card. He said staff could use alternate verification, but only when they believed the documents were reliable and the customer's conduct did not create a security concern. Conduct created the concern, Lena asked. She arrived with an obsolete card and an unverified key. She challenged staff instructions and refused to surrender bank property. The guard opened his notebook. She did not refuse verification. She refused to let us take the key out of her sight. Martin turned toward him. You are not trained in fraud assessment. No, the guard said. I am trained displayed the lobby footage. The recording showed Evelyn placing her license, expired card, and key on the counter. It showed Page searching her name, Martin leaning over the restricted profile, and the verification instruction glowing on the monitor. The camera could not capture the text clearly, but the system log confirmed it had appeared. Martin's attorney argued that 11 seconds was insufficient to read a complex notice. Page spoke from the far end of the table. I summarized it for him. Martin looked at her as if they were still standing behind the teller counter. You said the profile required executive authorization. No. I said it required fiduciary verification. Page's voice shook, then steadied. He told me it could not be her. Lena moved to the complaint call. Martin listened without changing expression as his own recorded voice described Andre as encouraging an unidentified trespasser. When the timestamp appeared, Helen leaned forward. At that point, she said, Miriam Shaw had already identified Mrs. Carter. I knew a name had been offered, Martin replied. I did not know the woman had been reliably authenticated. Then why did your later statement say you learned her identity only after Mr. Lewis left? Lena asked. Martin opened his folder and removed a printed draft. Because I was referring to confirmed identity, not a verbal claim. The wording may have been imprecise. Evelyn watched him convert 7 missing minutes into a vocabulary dispute. Yesterday, she might have interrupted. Today, she let Lena continue. The investigator placed the service comparison beside Martin's incident note. 4 customers had lacked account numbers. 3 received alternate verification. Evelyn alone was referred to security before her identification search was completed. Martin said the comparison ignored context. 1 customer was a longtime business client. Another had visited the branch before. The 3rd had behaved calmly. So did Mrs. Carter, Helen said. Martin's eyes flicked toward Evelyn. She was controlled. That is not the same as cooperative. The sentence settled into the room without assistance. Lena asked what Evelyn had done that was uncooperative before Martin labeled her a security concern. Martin cited her questions, her refusal to surrender the key, and her insistence on knowing what staff entered into her file. Each action, Lena noted, recurred after he had already told the guard she might be soliciting, and after Page had dismissed the key without checking it. Helen closed Martin's folder. Your explanation depends on her reaction justifying decisions made before the reaction. Martin's attorney requested a recess. Before the directors left, Lena submitted the authenticated call, the audit trail, and the comparison. Log into the formal record. Martin remained suspended. Page remained off the teller floor, and the external review expanded to include retaliation and selective escalation. Evelyn made only one request. Preserve every customer note, Mr. Vale. Amended after an employee challenged his first account. Helen nodded. That will be included. Across the table, Martin stopped arranging his papers. For the first time, he looked less concerned with Evelyn's ownership than with what his own revisions might show. The board reconvened 40 minutes later without Martin or his attorney. Helen Brooks read the interim findings from a single sheet, refusing the comfort of softer language. Martin had bypassed required verification, directed staff to use an unrelated customer profile, submitted statements contradicted by preserved records, and initiated a vendor complaint after learning that fiduciary services had recognized Evelyn. His suspension would continue while outside counsel completed the disciplinary review. Page would return to paid administrative leave rather than the teller floor. Her statement had helped preserve the record. Cooperation after the fact did not erase the note she had entered or the judgment she had admitted making. The guard, Marcus Reed, would remain on duty under a different supervisor while security procedures were reviewed. Andre's complaint would be withdrawn in writing, his lost shift reimbursed, and his employer barred from retaliating while Harbor and Pines vendor committee examined the route contract. Yet, Andre appeared on the conference screen from the depot. Bared for how long? Helen looked toward the bank's general counsel. Until the investigation closes, with a minimum of 90 days. And after that, we cannot control your employer indefinitely. Andre rubbed his thumb across the edge of his temporary badge. Then put the complaint withdrawal in my personnel file, not just your vendor file. The request produced a brief exchange among counsel, vendor oversight, and human resources. Evelyn stayed silent. 10 minutes later, Helen approved the amendment. The bank would send a signed correction directly to Andre's employer, stating that the allegation against him lacked factual basis and that his actions had assisted preservation of a disputed customer record. "That will do," Andre said. His relief was visible, though it did not resemble gratitude. He had asked for a correction, not rescue. Helen then addressed Evelyn's accounts. Central Fraud had fully removed the credential restriction. The false note would remain sealed within the investigative file, but disappear from every operational customer screen. Access to Box 317 could resume immediately with fiduciary verification, and the trust would receive reimbursement for any documented costs caused by the hold. Evelyn looked at the brass key beside Miriam's ledger. The residents lost hours of heat. Reimburse the cooperative for emergency equipment and the contractor's delay charge. The trust can submit those expenses. Counsel said the trust did not create them. Helen wrote the request into the interim order. Harbor and Pine would pay the cooperative directly, subject only to confirmation of the invoices. The distinction mattered to Evelyn. Restitution hidden inside her own accounts would let the bank describe the damage as a private inconvenience rather than a consequence of its action. Adopted 3 temporary controls before leaving the room. Branch staff could no longer create a credential threat note until alternate verification had been attempted or a specific safety reason documented. Any such note involving an older customer would receive second-person review before spreading across linked accounts. Complaints against employees or contractors who disputed an incident would be routed outside the originating manager's chain of command. None of the controls were permanent. The external reviewer would decide whether they worked, whether the 9 older cases showed a broader pattern, and whether Martin's conduct justified termination rather than continued suspension. Evelyn had no vote in that decision, and Helen made the limit explicit in the minutes. When the meeting ended, Miriam carried the vault ledger downstairs. The corridor smelled of concrete dust and the faint oil used on the locking mechanisms. Evelyn walked beside her more slowly than she had the day before. The private vault attendant checked her license, confirmed her appointment through fiduciary services, compared her signature with the ledger, and asked her to turn the key while he used the bank's guard key. No one apologized during the procedure. Evelyn preferred it that way. Box 317 slid from the wall with a scrape of metal against felt. Inside lay Samuel's sealed memorandum, a photograph from Harbor and Pine's first branch, and the fountain pen he had used at every board meeting for 36 years. Evelyn touched the envelope but did not open it. Miriam watched from the privacy room doorway. "You waited 3 years for that." "I know. Are you taking it home?" Evelyn placed the envelope in her repaired grocery bag beside the folded receipt Andre had given her. "No, I am taking it to the cooperative." Mrs. Bell has a kitchen table and no respect for solemn occasions. Upstairs, the temporary verification notice was already being installed behind the teller stations. It did not mention Evelyn, Martin, ownership, or the board. It instructed staff to check the record before deciding the customer was the problem. Evelyn paused long enough to read it once, then walked out beneath the chandelier in the same worn coat she had entered wearing. By the following afternoon, the east wing of the cooperative had heat again. The old boiler still knocked like somebody trapped behind the pipes, but every radiator carried warmth, and the emergency units were stacked near the lobby for pickup. Evelyn sat at Mrs. Bell's kitchen table, with Samuel's envelope between a chipped sugar bowl and a plate of butter cookies nobody had touched. Mrs. Bell examined the seal. 3 years in a vault, and now you are making it wait beside store-brand cookies. It survived bankers. It can survive your kitchen. That coat survived too, apparently. Evelyn looked down at the frayed cuff. You say that as though you dislike it. I say it because you own 6 better ones. The laugh caught Evelyn before she could prevent it. For several seconds, the branch, the review, and the heatless apartments loosened their grip. Then she opened the envelope with Samuel's fountain pen. His memorandum was only 4 pages. He wrote that Harbor and Pine had become too dependent on people who could recognize wealth and too careless with people who could not display it. He admitted that he had rewarded certainty in managers even when certainty hardened into arrogance. His final request was not that Evelyn protect his methods, but that she make the bank easier to challenge than he had made himself. Evelyn read that paragraph twice. Mrs. Bell did not ask what it said. She pushed the cookie plate closer and began sorting prescription bottles into a weekly tray, giving Evelyn the privacy of an ordinary task. The external review delivered its first completed findings 3 weeks later. Of the 9 older credential cases, 6 involved legitimate security concerns supported by checks, account discrepancies, or documented threats. 3 did not. In those 3, black customers over 60 had been escalated before staff completed available verification. 2 had received apology letters months earlier that described the incidents as communication failures. Neither letter had corrected the risk notes attached to their profiles. Harbor and Pine removed the notes, refunded fees caused by temporary holds, and paid for independent financial counseling where customers requested it. The bank contacted them directly without asking Evelyn to appear. She had insisted on that. Their cases belonged to them. Martin's employment ended after the review concluded that he had falsified the timeline, directed an inaccurate customer entry, and retaliated against a witness. Notice did not accuse him of thoughts no investigator could prove. It named the choices the records established. He retained the right to appeal under the bank's employment policy, but the appeal would not restore his authority while it was pending. Page returned after 6 weeks of paid leave, not as a teller. She entered a supervised customer records role and agreed to corrective training, quarterly review, and a written warning that would remain active for 2 years. Before returning, she asked to apologize to Evelyn. They met in the same branch conference room. Page arrived with 3 prepared pages, but Evelyn asked her to put them away. I laughed before I checked, Page said. Then I wrote what Bill wanted because it was easier than admitting I had been wrong first. Evelyn waited. I am sorry. Your apology is not the repair, Evelyn said. What you do when the next person looks wrong to you will be the repair. Page nodded, though the answer clearly gave her less relief than forgiveness would have. Andre's employer restored his regular route, reimbursed the lost shift, and placed Harbor and Pine's correction in his personnel file. He declined the bank's offer of a permanent internal position. I liked the work before everybody decided telling the truth was a career plan, he told Evelyn. He did agree to serve for 1 year on the new vendor protection panel, provided the meetings were paid. Marcus remained at the branch and helped rewrite the first contact security script. The new procedure required guards to ask what service a person needed before describing them as a threat, solicitor, or trespasser. Branch cameras retained disputed incidents for 1 year, and credentialless risk notes now required a second reviewer outside the originating manager's supervision. On the first morning the permanent rules took effect, Evelyn entered Harbor and Pine wearing the same repaired coat. Marcus greeted her, then greeted the delivery driver behind her with the same words. Page looked up from the records desk but did not smile for approval. She returned to checking a correction request line by line. Evelyn went downstairs, placed Samuel's memorandum back inside box 317, and removed only the old photograph of the bank's first branch. On the reverse, beneath Samuel's handwriting, someone had penciled the name of a neighborhood lending program Evelyn did not recognize. She slipped the photograph into her bag. The case in front of her was closed. The name on the back was only a question, and this time she did not mistake a question for an emergency. 6 months after Evelyn's visit to the flagship branch, Harbor & Pine published the first independent review in its history that named selective escalation as an operational failure rather than a vague problem of customer service. The report did not claim every harsh interaction had been driven by race, and Evelyn had refused language that reached beyond the evidence. It found something narrower and harder to dismiss. When staff relied on appearance, tone, or familiarity before completing verification, older black customers were more likely to be treated as security problems. The board adopted the reviewer's recommendations by an 11-to-1 vote. Credential risk notes now expired, unless supported by documented facts, and renewed by an independent officer. Every branch received quarterly comparisons showing who had been denied alternate verification, who had been referred to security, and whether those decisions survived review. Employees and contractors could report altered records outside local management, with compensation protected during an investigation. Evelyn remained recused from Martin's appeal, which failed after a separate panel upheld the findings against him. The bank paid the cooperative's emergency costs and delay charges without routing the money through the Carter Trust. It also reimbursed the 3 older customers whose profiles had carried unsupported warnings. One accepted a written apology. Another asked only for his account to be closed without penalty. The third refused contact beyond the correction notice. Harbor & Pine recorded each response without describing forgiveness as a required outcome. Page completed her supervised year without another customer record violation. During her final review, she submitted a change to the verification screen. Staff could no longer bypass a restricted profile by selecting a weaker namesake match without entering a reason. The modification was approved after testing showed that it would have stopped the action she took against Evelyn. She did not send Evelyn a copy of the approval. She had begun to understand that repair did not need an audience. Andre served his year on the vendor protection panel and argued so often with the bank's lawyers that the minutes began identifying his objections by category. His most important proposal required outside vendors to receive the same retaliation safeguards as employees when they preserved evidence of a disputed incident. The board adopted it after 2 revisions. Andre still delivered packets 3 days a week, though he no longer set his scanner on the counter as if expecting someone to take it from him. Marcus became the branch's training supervisor. On his first day, he told the new guards that uncertainty was not proof of danger, and that a manager's confidence did not relieve them of observing for themselves. He kept the small notebook from Evelyn's case in his locker, not as a relic, but as a reminder that the sentence he almost failed to write had changed what the bank could deny. Evelyn reduced her weekly board schedule and spent more mornings at the cooperative where Mrs. Bell continued to insult her clothes while accepting rides to medical appointments. The repaired coat remained in Evelyn's hallway. She wore it when it rained, when she gardened, and once to a shareholder reception simply because she no longer wished to let anyone else decide what the coat meant. On a cold morning in March, Evelyn returned to box 317 with the old branch photograph. She placed it beside Samuel's memorandum, then ran her thumb over the penciled name on the back. East Harbor Neighborhood Lending Circle. Miriam had found no current program by that name, only scattered references in 30-year-old board minutes and a set of small business loans transferred during a merger. "The review is complete," Miriam said from the privacy room doorway. "You are allowed to leave one mystery unopened." Evelyn smiled. Samuel called it a program. Yours call it a transfer. Those are not always the same thing. She closed the box and turned both keys with the vault attendant. Upstairs, the branch moved through its morning rhythm. A woman with a cracked identification card was offered alternate verification at Page's former station. A delivery driver asked Marcus where to leave a sealed packet, and Marcus answered before looking at the man's clothes. paused beneath the chandelier, listening to the ordinary sounds of a bank doing what it should have done the first time. Then she unfolded a photocopy of the old photograph and wrote the lending circle's name across the top of a fresh file. The case that began with her coat was closed. The next question had been waiting in the bank longer than Martin Vale ever worked there.